The heroic home for children had been abandoned long before I was born. They say one night, every child inside vanished, without a trace, without a sound. 32 children, gone. The staff was found in their beds, dead but untouched. No wounds, no struggle, eyes wide as if they had seen something before they died. No one rebuilt it, no one spoke of it, no one returned. Until now. I was just a contractor, part of the crew hired to tear the place down and build luxury condos. I didn't care about the ghost stories. But when I arrived, I felt it immediately. The place was wrong. The building stood at the end of a long, cracked road, surrounded by dead trees, their branches like bone fingers. The windows were boarded up, but I could feel something watching me from behind them. The air was heavy, stale. The moment I stepped onto the property, my skin prickled. I had worked on plenty of old buildings. None of them ever felt like this, like it was breathing, waiting, watching. The others joked, saying it was just a damn building. But when I touched the front door, the wood was cold as ice. And then I heard it. A child's laughter, faint, from inside. The orphanage had been empty for decades, but someone, or something, was still here. The first few days were normal. We gutted the place, ripped out the moldy carpets, knocked down walls. The whole building stank of dust and something foul, something deeper than rot, something wrong. Then, on the third night, I stayed late. I was walking the halls when I heard it, a child's giggle. It was soft, distant, but too clear to be my imagination. I stopped, heart hammering. I turned, nothing, just an empty, rotting hallway, stretching into darkness. Then I saw them, tiny footprints in the dust, leading toward the stairs, but no footprints coming back. The air grew heavier. The shadows along the walls shifted like something was moving just out of sight. I took a step forward, following the prints. But then, a cold hand brushed my neck. I spun around. Nothing. But the giggling continued. It was all around me now. Multiple voices. Then, a whisper, right next to my ear. "We see you." The orphanage still had its old dormitory upstairs. The beds were still made, the sheets yellowed with time. I don't know why I went up there that night. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something else calling me. The air was heavy, wrong. It smelled of dust, wood rot, and something sweeter, something rancid. Faded children's drawings lined the walls, scrawled with crude black crayon. They weren't happy scenes. The children had drawn monsters, tall, hollow-eyed figures looming over tiny, stick-limbed children. Some of the drawings had something stranger, eyes, dozens of eyes filling the page, staring. I shivered and moved deeper into the room. Then I saw them, the beds, row after row, perfectly aligned, untouched for decades. Each one had an indentation, as if something invisible was lying there, as if the children were still sleeping. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. I backed away, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Then the blankets slowly began to rise, not all at once, one at a time, like bodies sitting up. A faint rustling filled the room, like sheets being pulled back. A dormitory full of empty beds and something waking up. Then, the toys moved. Doll heads turned, their eyes cracked and faded. A tiny wind-up monkey clapped its cymbals, but one cymbal was missing, leaving it to bang its remaining one against the air. A jack-in-the-box in the corner sprung open, but instead of a clown, its headless figure wobbled back and forth. A rocking horse swayed, the wood splintered, one of its eyes gouged out. I froze. Then the mattresses indented, as if feet were dropping to the floor. The air felt electric, charged with something unseen. Then, a tiny, hollow whisper. We never left. I ran. Back down the stairs, through the halls, past the footprints in the dust. I didn't stop until I had to. At the end of the hallway, a child stood waiting. A girl. Her dress was torn, her hair matted. She didn't speak, didn't move, but she was staring at me. Her eyes were black holes, deep, bottomless pits where her eyes should have been. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Then from behind me, I heard a dozen tiny voices whispering at once. "We're still here." The girl twitched. Then she ran, straight at me. I turned and sprinted, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. I didn't stop until I slammed into a door. A storage room. I fumbled for the handle, yanked it open, and threw myself inside. I pressed against the old wooden shelves, my breath ragged. The room was cramped, filled with broken toys and dust-covered cribs. A toy soldier stood on a shelf, its face worn away, its eyes two black holes. A doll sat in a cradle, its arms missing, its lips sewn shut. Something tapped on the door. Soft, rhythmic. I hold my breath. Then, the door creaked open. The girl stood there. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, the shadows stirred. More children. Their eyes were empty. Their bodies twisted and jerked, moving like marionettes with broken strings. I ran again. I pushed past them, back into the hallway, down another flight of stairs. A door on my left, the kitchen. I dove inside. The old stove stood in the corner, rusted and stained. Moldy pots and dishes sat in the sink. The walls were covered in scratches, not rats, fingernails. The whispers followed me. I ducked into a cabinet, squeezing myself into the dark. The girl's footsteps approached, slow, measured. Then she stood outside the cabinet. I hold my breath. Through the slats, I could see her face, inches from mine. She spoke. "You can't hide forever." I didn't move. The girl's breath sounded ragged, just inches from the cabinet door. The darkness pressed in, suffocating. I counted the seconds, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, a guttural hiss. The whispering stopped. The air in the kitchen seemed to shift, and through the slats of the cabinet door, I saw the first slivers of sunrise creeping through the broken window. The girl stiffened. Then, just like that, she faded. One moment she was there, her hollow black eyes boring into mine, and the next she was nothing but dust, dissolving into the morning light. I waited, shaking, until the room was silent again. Then I forced myself out of the cabinet. The house felt different in the daylight, not safe, but less alive. I stumbled out onto the porch, gulping in fresh air, my hands still shaking. I wasn't sure how long I had been trapped inside, but as I staggered toward the worksite trailer, I saw the crew already gathering. That's when I realized one of us was missing. Eddie. A loud murmur ran through the workers. No one had seen him since last night. His truck was still there, his tools untouched. But Eddie, gone. Maybe he took off, one of the guys muttered, but I could see the fear in his eyes. We all felt it. Something was wrong. I made my way to the foreman's office looking for answers. The door was unlocked. Inside, the room was untouched, except for Eddie's work jacket still draped over the chair, and his hard hat lying in the middle of the floor. I bent down, picking it up. Inside, something had been scratched into the plastic. 3 words carved deep, as if by a child's hand. "Help me. Below." We should have left. Instead, we kept working. The sun was high, the air thick with the scent of sawdust and rotting wood. The foreman told us to keep moving, act like Eddie's disappearance was nothing, just some guy ditching work. But we all felt it. The house didn't want us there. Then the walls started whispering. It happened while I was tearing out an old support beam in one of the back rooms. The wood was damp, soft like it had been rotting from the inside out. As I wedged my crowbar between the joints, I heard it. Soft voices, dozens of them, murmuring inside the wood. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My hands trembled as I pressed my ear against the decaying beam. A child's voice whispered, "Help us." I stumbled back, the crowbar slipping from my grip. Then the beam split open, and teeth spilled out. Not animal teeth, human teeth. Hundreds of them, falling from the wood like they had been stuffed inside. They clattered against the floor, bouncing, rolling into the cracks of the rotting floorboards. A sickly, sweet smell filled the air. Then the walls shuddered. A low, moaning sound rippled through the orphanage, like something stirring beneath the floors. I heard screams from the other rooms. The other workers, running, yelling. I turned just in time to see the walls bulging. They pushed outward, like something inside was pressing against them. Shapes, tiny handprints, faces. The wood creaked, stretched too far. Then, bang! The room went dead silent. The whispering stopped. The walls settled back into place. The only sound was the soft clicking of teeth rolling across the wooden floor. I backed away, stepping over the scattered molars, my stomach twisting. Then I heard it. Giggling. A child's high, breathless laugh. I turned, and in the doorway, a little boy stood watching me. His face was pale, sunken, his mouth too wide. He smiled. His teeth were missing, the ones that had just spilled from the wall. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. "You took them. Now we take you." The next day, the crew refused to go inside. No one spoke about it. Eddie's disappearance, the teeth, the whispers, they just left. But I stayed. I had to know. The orphanage was silent, the kind of silence that felt wrong, not empty, not abandoned, watching. I stood in the main hall, staring up at the high rafters. The old wooden beams stretched into darkness, just beyond where the moonlight could reach. The floor beneath me was dusty and uneven, littered with scraps of broken toys and discarded shoes too small for anyone to wear. Then, something moved. A shadow twisted above me. I squinted, trying to focus. It was a child-shaped figure, but it wasn't hanging from the rafters. It was clinging to them, like a spider. Its limbs were too long, too thin. Its fingers hooked around the wood, bones creaking. Then it turned its head toward me. Not normally, not like a human. It rotated its neck in a full circle, bones snapping, jaw unhinging. The eyes were black holes, its mouth curled into a grin, a mouth full of teeth that weren't human. Then it came for me. It crawled upside down along the rafters, its joints bending the wrong way. Fast, too fast. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. My shoes scraped against the wooden floor. The thing stopped. It was directly above me now, hanging upside down, head twisted, staring. Then it dropped. I dove to the side as it slammed into the floor where I had been standing. It crouched, its bony frame clicking, jittering like a broken marionette. Then it chased me. I ran, down the long, rotting hallway, past the empty beds, past the scrawled drawings of monsters. I heard it behind me. Its nails scratched the walls, its footsteps too light, too quick. I threw myself into a side room and slammed the door shut. Darkness. I backed into a corner, trying to slow my breathing. Then tap, tap, tap on the door. It wasn't a knock. It was fingers, slow, dragging down the wooden surface. Then a voice. "Let's play." I didn't move. The tapping slowed, then stopped. For what felt like forever, I sat there in the dark, listening. Silence. I dared to breathe, my chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. I knew better than to trust it, but I also knew I couldn't stay here all night. I had to move. The room was an office. I could make out the outlines of old furniture. A massive wooden desk in the center, its surface layered in dust. I reached out, running my fingers across it. Paper, stacks of it. I fumbled for my flashlight, flicking it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing yellow documents, handwritten ledgers, and names scratched out in black ink. And then, a blueprint. I unrolled it carefully, my hands trembling. The layout of the orphanage stared back at me. Something about it felt off. Then I saw it. A room that shouldn't exist. A basement. It was hidden beneath the nursery. A space that had never been mentioned in any report. My stomach turned. Whatever happened here, whatever took those children, the answer was below. I just had to find the door. I slowly emerged from the office, my breath shallow, uneven. The hallway was silent. No tapping, no whispering, no sign of the thing that had chased me. The air still felt wrong, thick, oppressive, charged with something unseen. But the monster child was gone, for now. I looked down at the blueprint in my hands. The nursery was on the opposite side of the building. I had a long way to go, and I had no idea what else was waiting for me. But I had to do it. I had to find the basement, to find Eddie, to uncover the truth. I stepped forward, my footsteps echoing in the vast, empty halls. The orphanage had changed. Walls that had been straight now curved. Doorways that had been closed were now open. The building was shifting around me. The moment I realized it, the whispering started again. Faint, like children singing. I tightened my grip on the blueprint. I wouldn't let it distract me. Not this time. I followed the map, passing through rooms I didn't recognize. A dining hall, long wooden tables still set for meals that were never finished. Plates of rotted food, utensils still lying beside them, untouched for decades. A playroom, filled with broken toys, dolls with missing eyes, teddy bears ripped open, their stuffing spilled like guts. A rocking horse swayed gently, though no one was near it. I kept moving. As I turned a corner, I nearly screamed. A shadow stood at the end of the hall, small, childlike. It didn't move, it didn't breathe, just watched. I felt a cold sweat drip down my back. Then, the lights flickered, and when they came back on, it was closer. I took a step back. The lights flickered again. Now it was even closer. I turned and ran. Doors slammed shut behind me. The walls seemed to breathe, closing in around me, twisting the hallways into a maze. Then I saw it, a faded sign above a doorway. The nursery. I shouldered through the door, barely making it inside before the hallway behind me went black. The whispering stopped. I turned my flashlight toward the room and swallowed hard. Cribs lined the walls, their mattresses stained and rotted. Tiny blankets still lay crumpled, as if the children had just gotten up and walked away. But they didn't. They never left. I scanned the blueprint again, my hands trembling. The entrance to the basement was here, hidden beneath the floor. I just had to find the door. I scanned the room. At first glance, there was nothing. No hidden doors, no trapdoors, no secret entrance that matched what was on the blueprint. But I knew it had to be here. I turned in a slow circle, my flashlight sweeping across the room. The cribs stood like sentinels, their wooden frames rickety and broken. The peeling wallpaper hung in strips, curling at the corners, revealing the wood underneath. Then I saw it. A section of wallpaper near the back of the room was uneven, different from the rest, like someone had tried to hide something. My fingers trembled as I reached out, gripping the edge of the paper. I ripped it away, Behind it was a small wooden door, barely large enough for a child to crawl through. But it wasn't just hidden. It was sealed, nailed shut. Thick, old wooden planks had been hammered over it, as if someone wanted to bury what was inside, or keep something from getting out. I reached for my crowbar, wedging it beneath the planks. With a deep breath, I pulled. The first board splintered, then the second. The last one came off with a loud crack, the sound echoing through the empty nursery. The door creaked open. A set of narrow stairs led downward into complete darkness. A breath of stagnant air rolled up, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. I stepped forward. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, each step pulling me deeper into the unknown. At the bottom, my flashlight flickered, and I saw them. The floor was littered with bones, tiny, fragile skeletons. Some still clutched rotting blankets, others curled into fetal positions. Their skulls turned toward me in silent, eternal screams. A wave of dread crashed over me. This was where they had been put, not missing, not stolen, buried alive. Then I heard a soft groan. I spun, my flashlight landing on a figure slumped against the wall. Eddie. His face was pale, sunken, but his chest rose and fell in weak breaths. He was alive. I rushed to him, grabbing his shoulders. "Eddie!" His eyes fluttered open, dazed and unfocused. Then behind me, footsteps. I turned, my heart lodged in my throat. The two children stood at the entrance to the basement, the girl and the boy. But this time, they weren't monsters. They weren't hollow. They stood hand in hand, their black eyes now soft and human. They smiled, a look of thanks. And then, they turned and walked through the open door, fading, gone. I looked back at Eddie, tightening my grip. "Come on, man, we're getting out of here." With the last of my strength, I pulled him up the stairs, stepping over the tiny bones that would never move again. As I reached the top, I felt it. The house breathed. The air was lighter, and for the first time since stepping foot inside, I felt something else. Peace. Later, when the authorities arrived, they didn't believe what we saw. They took Eddie to the hospital, kept me at the site for questioning. I told them everything. The voices, the shifting halls, the children. But all they cared about was what we found beneath the nursery. 32 tiny skeletons, the missing children of Harrowick Home. For decades, people thought they had vanished, but they never left. Someone had put them there, and now I knew who. Old files, forgotten records, buried paperwork left in the foreman's trailer after the orphanage shut down. I dug through it while waiting for the cops to finish their search. And in a single yellowed folder, I found the truth. A man named Harold Fenwick, a caretaker at Harrowick Home. He had been loyal, devoted, and, toward the end, delusional. His journals spoke of an unseen force coming for the children. Something crawling beneath the floors, whispering through the walls. He became obsessed with protecting them. And his solution was horrifying. He hid them in the basement. He sealed the door, and then he killed everyone else in the orphanage. The nurses, the cooks, the teachers himself. He thought he was saving them, but he had only trapped them, left them to starve. No one found them, not until now. I stared at the folder, my hands shaking. The ghosts of the children had been waiting, not for revenge, not for salvation, just to be found. And now, at last, they had been. The house would stand empty once more, but I knew, deep down, their whispers would never leave me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Click the bell icon so you never miss any new content. Stay tuned for more creepy stories coming soon. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the dark, subscribe for more. Because the best horror isn't what you hear. It's what follows when the story is over.